What is the secret to unlocking your full potential? What makes your idols any different than you? How do you become the person you've always wanted to be in life? This is where you get all of your questions answered. My name is Justin Schenk, and I sit down with some of the most epic individuals who are changing the world with their actions in business and in life. We discuss how they did it, why they pushed themselves, and more importantly, how they were able to focus on continuous growth to achieve their dreams. Welcome to the Growth Now movement. Hey guys, I just wanted to take a quick second and let you know that I am helping podcasters all around the world level up their podcast, grow their audience, and learn how to monetize their show quickly. If this is something that you're interested in, go over to beginpodcastingnow.com, fill out the contact form, and we'll hop on a free 20-minute consultation call to see how I can help you do the same thing. Now, let me introduce you to our next guest. This week, I sit down with my friend, Dr. Michael Hudson.
I mean, the magic is in the questions. It's never in the answers. And there's this powerful underlying reason why questions matter. If I can get you, Justin, to tell yourself the thing that I want you to learn, you own it.
Michael's a former college professor turned business consultant, coach, and speaker. He's helped over 2,500 companies over the last 30 years find their message, get it heard, and grow their business. I had the pleasure of meeting Michael when we both spoke at the Thing in Orlando, Florida a couple months ago. We were really able to find some time and what turned into a very deep conversation. Michael and I became fast friends, sharing real stories of struggle with each other and overcoming adversity with each other. I knew I had to have Michael on the show because I think you guys will really enjoy his message and what he's trying to spread. In this episode, he shares personal struggle and how he overcame it. He talks about how the low points has really created the successes in his life, and he shares his secrets with you on how to get your message heard and how you're able to impact people, whether it's one person or thousands of people, because all that matters is that one. Make sure you actually check out Michael's podcast called Get Your Message Heard with Michael Hudson. It's an absolutely amazing show. I think you guys will love his friends that he brings on the show, including myself and many others. Now, here's how you can really help me out. Smack that subscribe button and tune in week after week to the Growth Now movement. I really think you guys are going to really love what's coming up next. I have some big announcements coming in the next couple months. Now, without further ado, I give to you my good friend, Dr. Michael Hudson. Michael, welcome to the Growth Now movement.
It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here, Justin. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, we met at the Thing in Orlando. It was last weekend? This has been a busy week, so I feel like it was a lot longer ago, but it was just this last weekend. And you and I were, a group of us actually were having a drink afterwards, having a nice Macallan 20 or something like that. And it was ridiculous. 18 Macallan 18. and which was delicious, but we had great conversation and I was like, you need to come on my show. And not only that, you spoke on a stage. And from that standpoint, I was like, this message needs to be heard. What you're doing right now is game changing. I think it really is. And you've got such a cool story. And I really like how you broke it down. And that's what we're going to get into. But just to introduce yourself briefly to my audience, who is Dr. Michael Hudson? Who are you today? And then we'll get into the backstory.
Well, I'm a recovering college professor, so that's the one piece of the backstory is probably necessary because I'm an educator at heart, and that hasn't changed. But, I'm a person who spends my time trying to help people unlock that message, Justin, that's inside of them, the one that is unique and distinct to them because of the journey they've traveled, and help them figure out who's the right audience and how do I get it to that audience. So, my target clients, are expertise entrepreneurs, speakers, coaches, consultants, who have something inside of them that's driving them, but what gets in their way a lot is they don't get clear on their message. So they race from shiny object to shiny object, ride the random revenue roller coaster, and get frustrated. I'm the guy who helps them avoid those things.
Yeah, I love that. And when you spoke on a stage, you did something really cool. And actually, after you spoke, I forget who I was sitting next to, but I leaned to the person next to him like, I loved how he broke that down and how to highlight certain things. And you talk about breaking your life down into decades or segments. And then you kind of highlight the highs and lows because both are as equally as important.
Yeah.
Which is really what this show is all about, is about that. What was your low moment that you've kind of turned around and said, this was now my purpose kind of deal?
Yeah.
And so let's talk about that a little bit. So how did you come up with this idea of like breaking your life into decades? And so that kind of works for anybody. I'm 33, so I've got 3 segments that I can break it into, and really kind of highlight like what are the points that stuck out. But where did that even come from for you?
You know, it's interesting, Justin, and I want to be really careful here and make sure I try to give credit where I know credit is due. You know, I know Simon Sinek does a similar exercise in his why programs. Donald Miller, when Donald Miller used to do the storyline, I believe is what he called it then, this big workshop, and they did something similar. So I can't claim to be the creator of it. But when I heard about it, and then I had that moment, right? I mean, I there will be moments in our lives when, you know, big milestone moments, right? And I'm flying back last August. I'm taking the red eye, which I refused to do at this age. However, I was going to miss my 60th birthday with my family if I stayed where I was. And on the plane, which one of those days I couldn't sleep, I'd actually had a pretty good engagement with a client that day, driven 2 hours from, I forget where I was, Sedona, from Sedona to Phoenix. And, you know, then I'm flying home. And I got thinking about, you know, okay, you're going to be 60 years old tomorrow. What have you learned? And so I thought about that Donald Miller's example. I thought about Sinek. I thought about how powerful that is. And I said, I'm just going to write what I've learned over 6 decades on the planet. And so I just fleshed out this quick post, put it on Facebook. It is the one thing I've ever shared on Facebook that actually got a lot of attention. And said, you know, this has got to be in my work because this is where, you know, it's said in several different ways, right? But the source of your most significant pain is often the path to your most significant impact. And if we leverage that and figure out what that means. So, you know, and as I shared from the stage, some people need multiple periods, right? You know, 3 may work for you because you may have the mental capacity to do that. Others may feel like I need more contrast. So just break it into 5 or 6 equal periods. And 5 would work fine. I use 6 because I was 60.
Yeah.
But I find if you it's the horizontal line on the page. You draw a horizontal line on the page. On the left-hand side, you put the day you were born. On the right-hand side, you put today's date. Break it into equal increments. What did you learn? And instead of saying, okay, let me write down what I learned, say what was the most significant emotional experience I had positively and the most significant emotional experience I had negatively during those periods. And look for 2 or 3 in each of those periods. Draw lines relative to the relative height of the impact. And then step back. What does that tell me? And it'll tell you a lot.
Yeah.
And you'll often find this interesting thing, right? That really deep point, the one that truly sucked, led you to something that may not be in the next period, but 1 or 2 periods down the road that changed your life. Yeah. Because what I find the exercise does is it reveals the thread that runs through. I prefer to call it the river, but it's the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so big because so many people ask me because I talk a lot about my purpose and, you know, obviously the passion and why the podcast was born. And a lot of people ask me all the time, like, how did you find your purpose? And I think that's a great exercise to step back and be like, what am I actually here to teach the world? Because I think at the end of the day, that's everybody's purpose. Like that is, yes, you've been given a gift, whether it was a positive or negative, you've been given a gift. So life happens for you, not to you. And you need to figure out how you're going to then translate that into giving back.
Yes.
And you got real open and vulnerable about your story and really what the low moments were. And I think it's a good example of like looking back decades ago and being like, wow, that impacted me a lot more than I had thought. Do you mind sharing a little bit about what you'd shared on stage?
Sure. And the fact of what you said, Justin, just now is the point. It was, you don't realize how much it's still impacting you.
Yeah.
You know, in my first decade of life, my lesson was number 1, shut up. And that was because I talked all the time. You know, I'm a verbal processor. I understand the world by talking through it. Therefore, I give longer answers to questions sometimes than people want. But that's how I understand. And that's how I confirm your understanding, right?
Yeah.
So when teachers are telling you to stop talking, you're hearing shut up and you're thinking, okay, I have no value. My ideas have no value. I might as well just give up. Well, then you have a horrible event happen to you. And a horrible event that is repeated many times across the course of a year. And in my case, that was that someone raped and molested me for over a year. And in each instance, at the end said, if you ever tell anyone, I will kill you. Now, you know, that silenced me real fast.
Yeah.
And while that's painful, I need the audience to understand I'm fine. You know, I worked through it. But I also want to be honest about that. I didn't fully work through it for about 40 years.
Yeah.
I suppressed the whole thing for a very long time, but it's the way these triggers match, right? What happened in the next, and right on the cusp between that decade and the next, is I saw this speaker who told of his painful journey into heroin addiction, his recovery, his falling back, his standing on the street corner watching a family leave, waiting until they got out of their house so he could go rob them to buy his next fix. And for the first time in my life, I paid attention. I didn't need to talk to understand that because it riveted me, the story. So learning the power of story then opened this door where all of a sudden, okay, here's a way I can get through all this. So I turned to story. Well, fast forward and go through the next several decades. What's the common theme in my life? It's story. It's speaking up. It's not allowing yourself to be silent, and it's showing up as who you really are and realizing a lot of times we're holding ourselves back because of the voices in our head that make us think we're not good enough. When in reality, that voice is primarily, I would argue, about thinking you're not good enough for everyone. And you're not, because no one's here for everyone. Justin Schenck has a story that's important to a certain group of people. Michael Hudson has a story that matters to a certain group of people. But we drive ourselves nuts thinking, oh, that person didn't get it. That's not your person.
Yeah.
Move on.
Yeah.
So, to me, that's the biggest thing. And what I discovered when I really look back, standing there at that 6th decade going, okay, what's back there? I said, you know what? I've only ever been about one thing, communication. Every success I've ever had is because I was able to craft a vision, communicate it to other people, and get them excited about helping me achieve it. Everything I did in the academic world, building 2 nationally recognized programs at an Ivy League university and a Big Ten university, all came from that. But the point is, I never called myself that.
Yeah.
I didn't think being a communication guy sounded good enough.
Well, I think when you take a look at anybody's life, right? So I think sometimes there's people that are doing incredible things, and they don't realize it because they're in the middle of it. Even as a college professor, and even though at the end of the day it didn't fulfill you long term, you were doing incredible things. You were shaping lives with what you were teaching individuals, right? And then you moved on and you started shaping lives in the next the next step and then the next step. But then you figured it out. You figured out the art of taking a deep breath, taking a step back, and realizing not only the past, but realizing now. And how do I communicate? And how do I learn? And how do I help others? And how do I do all those things? I think sometimes in this rat race we call life, because we're taught that we always should be moving and going to the next thing and going to the next thing. We don't stop and take a deep breath and almost celebrate our wins, right?
Yeah.
And so you're obviously somebody who's been extremely successful. However you want to define that word success, right? In everything that you do. Like you said, 2 massive colleges, Ivy League, and you said Big Ten.
Yeah.
So I believe in Big 10.
Big 12 now, right?
Big 12, right. Ivy League in Big 12. And then obviously into the corporate world, and you've really transitioned really well as well. What do you attribute that to as somebody who's able to you've been successful in everything?
Well, I appreciate the compliment. And there's lots of failures we could talk about. And that's part of what I attribute success to, not being afraid to fail.
Yeah.
And I just, I have this, Justin, my earliest memories are trying to help other people become as good as they could be. Don't ask me what caused that, where it came from. It's just if I watch somebody and they're holding back and I know they can do more and they do it with me privately, but then we're in the public situation and they don't do it.
Yeah.
And, before anybody thinks that's weird, you saw it on the playground just like I did.
Mm-hmm.
You saw the kid who opted out. You knew something was going on there. Well, I think I knew something was going on there because I think I have a little bit of an empath nature in me that I could feel that pain that kid was feeling because I know what that pain was.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a lot of it. My privilege in the academic world was serving the students. My pain in the academic world was living in a bureaucracy where I just couldn't understand why you weren't allowed to do the thing that made sense.
Yeah.
So, and then when I left that world and started to translate that to, serving corporate clients and doing strategic planning and culture development and leadership development programs, I think the thing that always made it work was I have a 4-step mantra I live by. Ask, listen, learn, and serve. And if you ask enough questions, the magic is in the questions. It's never in the answers. And there's this powerful underlying reason why questions matter. If I can get you, Justin, to tell yourself the thing that I want you to learn, you own it. If I tell it to you, you can put up your walls.
Right.
You can do this and walk away. But if I can, and what I discovered is that story is the gateway. Because the story will make you go, wait a minute, I've had something like that happen to me. I should do what that guy's talking about. Now it wasn't me lecturing. So that's where the secret of asking and learning comes in, because you've got to really learn what the person thinks. Yeah. That means you probe deeper. You don't stop asking. And the listening part is the bridge, And then the serve part is, I think too often we in our businesses, entrepreneurs, we're always worried about the next paying client. If we find the next happy person, we will find the next paying client.
Yeah.
The person that you over-delivered and served them before, instead of saying, you have to jump right to buy this.
Right.
It changes the equation. So, that mantra to me, and it's just been inherent in who I am. I didn't label it for a while. And the other piece I can't go without saying because of what we shared earlier. If there's something in the past that's in the way, go solve it.
Yeah.
Whether it's therapy, whether it's journaling, whether it's some special experience, or whatever, get it out of your way. I didn't do that. The first time my pain emerged, it pretty much cost me the academic career because I couldn't deal with being there anymore, and I made a path to get myself invited to leave.
Yeah.
And I did some counseling then, didn't stick with it, and it came back and haunted me again 15 or 20 years later.
Yeah.
So it's that's a key piece I don't want to leave out.
Yeah, of course. I'm glad you brought that back up because I was going to come back around to that. What part of that thing happening to you, being raped and molested, what part does that play in you being an overachiever? And I think the term, I think the term overachiever is used negatively sometimes. I don't mean it that way. I just mean the fact that you do well in everything that you do. But so what part does that play?
See, and I think you raised that's a beautiful question, Justin. And because there is this reality, right? You become very good at protecting yourself. Protecting yourself includes being able to protect yourself when you don't succeed. That's the failure point, right? So you learn how to put on this mask and this suit, almost like the superhero, and you show up. Now, because most of those things make us feel devalued, we strive to do more than anybody else because we want the recognition. And we need the recognition in here to silence the voices, to say, see, I told you I am good enough.
Yeah.
Not only am I good enough, I'm better than the rest. And I think we can get into that, that hamster wheel and ride that hamster wheel for a long time. One of my realities is I had the privilege of building 2 programs at 2 universities and got a lot of attention for it. Mm-hmm. Now, I went there to teach. My breakthrough moment, Justin, was a student walking in my office one day asking me if I had time to talk about something, and I didn't. Because my calendar in those days was literally scheduled from 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. every night of the week.
Wow.
Because I was doing a lot of fundraising, a lot of gripping and grinning. And he said, I thought you were supposed to be here for us.
Wow.
And he very kindly raised his hand with 1 digit extended and walked out of my office.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy.
And it was the 2 before to the face moment. He's right. So I literally had to chase him down the hall because it took me a minute to sort of recover from the 2 before to the face.
Yeah.
And I said, wait a minute, let's talk. There's a step I missed, right? I sent him to my assistant outside. She looked at the calendar. I couldn't talk to him for about 7 days. And that's when he stuck his head in.
Yeah.
So I said, look, you're right. I'm here for you. What do you need? He said, well, you don't have time. I said, however long it's going to take, we're going to solve it. Are you comfortable doing it here? Or do you want to go back to the office? He said, we can start. And, Justin, what was the reality? Many of the problems people come to us that are most pressing for them, we've seen many times. Mm-hmm. We had a 3-minute conversation and I told him what to do and his problem was solved. He thought it would take an hour.
Right.
But we get and I think it's even worse in today's world, right? We get caught up. Well, when I walked away from that student in the 70 yards or so it took to get back to my office, I realized I've got to change. I came here for them. So I walked into my administrative assistant and I said, cancel my afternoon. Well, you can't. You got this. I said, I don't care. Cancel it. Well, but I said, pretend I'm sick. Lock the door. I'm going in my office. And I then analyzed my calendar for the last 3 months. I was teaching 500 students in one class. I was teaching 70 in another. And I had my senior seminar where I had 15. I discovered less than 7% of my time was being spent on the teaching function, and the rest was being spent on bureaucratic, you fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And I wrote my letter of resignation.
Wow.
And I didn't walk down and deliver it that afternoon because the voices got involved, particularly the voices of, okay, how do you walk away from an endowed chair at an Ivy League institution when you're 36 years old? But, I looked down at myself. I weighed 275. I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
Something's going to die, and it's not going to be the bureaucracy. So I think the point of that story, to your question, right, is you put the mask and the suit on. You do anything you can to get the validation you're looking for because of what happened to you having made you devalue yourself. You look for external feedback, and you find ways to get it. And your mask and suit of armor protects you from the failures. So you learn how to succeed.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you're fulfilled. There's still this big empty hole.
That's really big. And I think that when you break down what everybody's chasing in life, and I talk about this pretty often because, I think that I talk to all these people who are chasing money and chasing women and chasing cars and chasing abs and chasing all this stuff, but really they're just looking to be happy. And they don't know how to figure out that happy because that's the hole we're talking about. They're chasing what everybody else is telling them they should be chasing. So how do you make that shift in life to say, I'm done chasing what everybody else is telling me to chase or what I thought that I should be chasing and actually chase the parts that I need to? How do you make that shift? How do you make that conscious decision?
I think you do the exercise we talked about earlier and you get clear on what that thread is. And you look at where you are at this moment and say, am I utilizing the gifts I was given? And wherever your spiritual foundations happen to be in your life, we were all given gifts. It is our responsibility to use them. And I think it's very easy to ask this question. Are there people who need it who are not benefiting because I'm not using it? And when you get clear on what that thread is, and it's not this is not a do this exercise once, Justin, bing, I'm done. Got it.
It's all figured out now.
Yeah. This is you do it over and over. In my case, I journal. And by the way, I dictate my journal because I'm a verbal processor. So that's how I do it, right? I throw my headphones on, I turn on Dragon, and I just open up a doc and I just go. But I think you got to do the work, and you've got to start looking. For me, one of the catalytic moments when I was on this journey was I was unpacking a box and I came across a folder that's about this thick, and I'm delighted that and honored that and humbled that it's this thick. It contains letters from former students that I taught at the University of Illinois at Cornell.
Wow.
As well as any letters I've gotten from anybody in the business world that I've worked with who has chosen to send me one. And I read through them. And an hour and a half later, tears in my eyes, I realized, you know what? None of these people say anything about what I taught them about business or economics or entrepreneurship or agribusiness. They all mention you taught me how to write and communicate and speak. And that has done more for me in my career and helped me succeed than anybody else. And then, ding, 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 the light bulb starts flashing. Yeah, that's what I believe in. Why did I teach that? Where did my biggest pain come from? From being silenced.
Yeah.
So, don't think this is just my story, listeners. I've talked to hundreds, if not thousands of people. They have the exact same story. There's something that happened back here that equipped them to do something over here that they're not doing because they don't think they're good enough. They don't think they have the right. They haven't put in the work. They haven't figured out what it is. And that's one of the things I do in my exploration calls with people is try to at least get open the door to let you look in and say, oh, that may be where my thing is.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah, that was a great answer. So you had mentioned about how there's so many people in the world that need to hear your message directly from you, right? And so there's a lot of people not sharing their message. Actually, this guy over my shoulder, Preston Smiles, he says something along, and he said this on my show. He goes, at any given time, at any given moment, there's 75,000 people in the world that need to hear your message from you. And that's really a lot about what you preach is like, hey, it's important to share your message. And that's how you really find your thing, right? So what would you say to somebody who has that message to really get them out of it? Cause, I work with, I do podcast production, which you and I talked about. And I work with people who I'm like, they come to me and they go, I think I have this thing. I think this is what I want to do, but I'm afraid to do it. So what would you say to those people to get them to step forward and not be afraid to do it?
This is going to sound, Justin, like it was a setup question, and it wasn't. But honestly, I'd tell them to start a podcast. And the reason I would tell them that is this, because you put these earbuds in your ear, you stand at a microphone, you sit, whatever your preferred position is, and you start working through what you believe in. And you're doing it in the spirit of service to the people who are listening. And, honestly, you won't like this, but I don't care if you just start one and never release it.
Yeah.
Because the clarity you will get when you start working through. I mean, let's not pretend this journey has been easy for me, right? I mean, I made a pivot. In 2014, I decided I was sick and tired of what I was doing, primarily because I live to provoke people, to make them uncomfortable, to make them realize there is more out there and it is their responsibility to go do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't happy in the work I was doing because I couldn't do that. And so I went to Michael Hyatt's platform conference, and I heard Ken Davis speak. And there I saw a man who has spent 30 plus years doing nothing but teaching people how to communicate better, fulfilled and happy. At that moment, I'm still sitting there a little angry because I haven't identified what it is yet.
Yeah.
The next week I go to an event and Michael Bungay Stanier speaks. He teaches the concept of good work, bad work, and great work. Bad work is wombat, a waste of money, bandwidth, and time. Good work is your job description. It's the stuff you're good at. If you don't do it, it doesn't get done. But great work is that life-altering stuff that you're here to do. He then had us complete a pie chart of how much of each we're doing. When I completed the pie chart, 65% of the work I labeled as bad work.
Wow.
On the flight home, I made a list of my clients. What are the commonalities? The bad work clients wouldn't let me wouldn't let me push them to think bigger. They wanted the world to come back to the way it was. Well, what was that really telling me, Justin? They're raising their hand going, I'm not your client.
Right.
And so I fired that 65% of my business the following Monday, which cut out about 70% of my revenue.
Yeah.
And then I said, I've got to get out of this. I also, by the way, wrote a description of who the right ones were, the great ones. And guess who suddenly started showing up? Because when you stop doing the stuff that isn't aligned with who you are, you give space for the stuff that is to get into your life. Mm. And many of us get on the hamster wheel and we're so busy doing this stuff, we don't allow that other stuff to show up in front of us, even though it's right here.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I love that. And you said that on stage and you said it again today. And it's funny hearing it a second time. It creates even a different thought process, right? Of like, okay, well, now I'm thinking even deeper into it. And am I doing that stuff? Like, I believe that these conversations and me releasing the show, that's the great work. That's the impact. That's that's really kind of, I believe what I'm the best at. Now, what I'm good at is I'm good at the production and podcast coaching. Yeah. And I spend a lot of time doing that, obviously, because you have to. And then there's other stuff. I have certain clients where I'm like, should I fire them? You know what I mean? Because they're not listening. They're not making the changes. They're not getting me their stuff on time. They're not. So it's interesting. And I think that anybody can relate that to anything in their life. Even if it's like a student that's listening to this, like, what are you focusing on? Like, if you're in school, are you in the right classes? Are you headed down the right path? Where's your time focused on, And I think that's such a great analogy for all things in life, and just cut out the fat, just cut it out and really focus on what's really, really good. So
and Justin, back to the question you had asked, right? The reason the podcast has value for that and why I say that's the solution, because you're going to have to work through it. Mm. Whether it's with this or whether it's on paper or whether it's in one-on-one, you've got to work through that and do the work. And the podcast gives you a way to force you every week to think through.
Yeah.
I know that by episode 30 of my podcast, I had my message figured out much better than I did when I started. And I know now at episode 66, I actually know what the message is.
Yeah.
So, I want to echo that. It's not a short journey, but my answer truly to your question is start a podcast.
Yeah. But by the way, your check's in the mail, for answering that way. No, but honestly, so here's the thing, right? So, you talk about like your messaging and like, what are you supposed to be talking about? And it really was like the more you talk about it, the more you do it, the more your message comes out, and like, what's your purpose and what are you supposed to be here for? For the longest time, I avoided being the podcast guy. But everything kept telling me to be the podcast guy. And I was like, no, I don't feel like that's my mission. But then I realized it was, because I help people like you release these podcasts and then, get them out there. But I only work with people who have a message, who have a purpose, who have a passion. It's not, I don't work with people who are like, yeah, I'm just doing this to hawk some of my insurance business. You know what I mean? Nothing wrong with that if that's what you want to do, but that's just not the type of client that I want to work with. Yeah. And then I realized I just made this podcast thing align with my messaging more than anything else. So I love all that stuff. So what's next for you in this the sixth, would this be your 7th decade? I guess so, because 1 to 10 and then.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So now your 7th decade on the planet. What's next?
That's how I opened the blog post. As tomorrow I start my 7th decade on the planet.
Yeah.
Well, number one is I shifted my thinking, and said, okay, I'm looking at the next 25 years, not the next year, and wish I had learned that sooner.
Yeah.
That's actually from Dan Sullivan. He has a great book called The 25-Year Framework. And one of the points is, if you think in 25 years, if one quarter goes bad, it was only 1%.
Yeah.
And so one of the journaling questions I added after reading that book was that every morning I write about what do I want, but not what do I want today. What do I want 25 years down the road? Not how to get there. The what versus the how. Separating the what and the how matters a lot. But, I've decided to, and by the way, I've got to say this because of what you just said. Narrowing your focus to say no to the ones that don't fit is the best way you can bulletproof your business.
Yeah.
It's the biggest mistake I've seen made every industry, every individual ever worked with 35 years. But for me, what's next is to, find 1,000 people whose lives I change by helping them unlock their message and leaving them with the challenge of, now that you know it, you go find 1,000.
Yeah.
Teach them to go find 1,000. Because as you know, the movement in my mind that I'm starting is the step up, show up, and speak up movement. Mm-hmm. And the step up says, get yourself in the right rooms with the right people, because you can't do it unless you are. If you're the smartest person in the room, find a better room. If you walk in a room and you go, I'm not sure I belong here, run away. Because if you have that feeling is right. And when you show up as who you are. I think we hold ourselves back because we think people are going to judge us. We think we're not allowed. We think if we play all out and go all in, people are going to laugh at us, or we might fail. So what? Failure is merely a chance to begin again more intelligently.
Yeah.
I think that's an Einstein or an Edison quote. And then the speak up part is, what is that message? And that's the work. Discover the message. So for me moving forward, that's where the passion is. We are expertise entrepreneurs. We were gifted with knowledge, wisdom, and experience. That combines to form our expertise. That expertise is designed to create an impact on the world through those people who need your message. My objective through this next decade at a minimum is to help 1,000 people do that so that we can impact more people, because there's 75,000 people per the podcast behind you are waiting and they need it. And when you hit the moments of struggle, Justin, I always ask myself this question when I'm feeling like I'm not on track. Have I touched one person? Did it matter to them? And if you know that, it gives you some motivation to keep going, because who's the next one and who's the next one and who's the next one?
Yeah.
And in our world of social media followers and all that, we get too hung up on, do I have 12,000? Do I have 15,000? Do I have 5,000? Do I have 2? One's enough. Because who's to say that person you just helped isn't the one who's going to go touch 1 million people, because that's their vision?
Yeah.
So what's next for me is really driven by that. It's by meeting fabulous people like you, having a chance to get to know them better. It's by sharing a message like I got the privilege of sharing last week on stage, and sharing that message everywhere I can. Because what I know, as you know from hearing my story last week, when you show up as you, fulfillment is no longer a question. It's there every minute, every day.
Yeah.
And I just want that for everybody else that I interact with who connect with that message from me. Others may need it from Tony Robbins. They may need it from Justin Schenck, but the ones that need it from me, I'm trying to find.
That's awesome. By the way, if you're listening to this while you're driving, listen to this episode again when you're sitting down and you can take notes, because this is some game-changing information. And this is not me blowing smoke. You can go listen to my other episodes, by the way, if you don't believe me. I haven't done this very often, but there's a lot of great takeaways in this that you want to, I think jotting things down are important. I think that when you write them down, it becomes real, right? It sinks in a little bit further. Like, I was taking notes, at this conference, and like, I take notes at every conference, even if I'm one of the speakers, because I'm like, these are the people I need to surround myself with. I mean, when we all got together after my last day there, I'm like, this is why I'm here. This conversation, that level up conversation. When you go, are you the smartest person in the room? Get the hell out of the room. Like, I was definitely in that circle, that table. I was definitely not the smartest person in that circle. I was far from it, but I learned so much in that conversation. And that's the point. Like, you don't have to always be the person adding the value. And I think sometimes we get caught up in that idea that, like, if we're not bringing the value, then all of a sudden, I'm not worth something to these people. Right. But that's not the point of every conversation or every interaction that we have. And so I think that that's really important and a big key. So obviously doing this podcast and the venture you're about to get into when you're interviewing people in your podcast, you realize that you have these insane in-depth conversations with really successful people. And I'm honored to be able to do that, right? But I think everybody has a different definition of success. So my question for you is, what is your definition of success? Why can't I say definition today? So what is your definition of success? And what are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that success?
It's changing people's lives. And, that may feel fuzzy and esoteric, but that's what I care about. And, that change can be a small thing, right? So, you get the things you do every day. I open doors for other people and let them go through. I say thank you if someone opens a door for me. That just commitment to that small touch, because you never know, right? Everybody we meet is undergoing challenges we have no insight into whatsoever. And it could be that just opening the door for that person made them realize, no, humanity doesn't suck. There are still nice people in the world. So that's one. A second, and I start my day every day journaling, and I have 4 questions in my journal. One is, what did you learn yesterday? And I actually recently modified that question to, what did you learn or teach yesterday? Because I feel like that's as equally important, and, to teach is to learn twice. So I actually relearned it. The second is, what are you grateful for today? The third is, what do you want? And the fourth is, what are you going to accomplish today? And I find by devoting, 15, 20, 30 minutes, depending on how deep I choose to go that morning and how much I need to go that morning, that's just changed my life. The gratitude practice alone. My podcast opens and then I take a moment of gratitude and give a shout of gratitude to somebody for something they've done that's helped me. I don't think we do that enough.
Yeah.
Some of your listeners today are listening and you're thinking right now maybe of, he reminds me of this professor or this teacher I had one time or this boss I had one time who was always this or that. Well, write that person a note. Send them a gift. Send them a book. Pick up the phone, give them a call. Send them an email. Let them know. And let them know because of what it will do for them. But don't miss what it will do for you. And so people say, and I think the problem with gratitude lists for some people is they put the bar too high, right? I'm grateful for ice cream, dude. It's an amazing thing. Last night, my wife and I went out and had the first steamed crabs of the year. Nice. You're from this area close enough that you know what that means.
Yep.
And, our routine after having steamed crabs is always to go grab an ice cream cone. Well, right now, we're not really eating a lot of ice cream. But we got in the car and looked at each other and said, we still got to go.
Yep.
Because, so the point is, don't put the gratitude list the bar so high nothing gets on the list or you fight to make the list. Just dump the list out of your brain.
Yep.
The third thing I do every day is read something or listen to something that broadens my perspective. Sometimes that's a book, and if I don't have anything else pressing, I'll read the entire book before lunch. Other times it's, a brief section, or it's grab Justin's podcast or grab someone else's podcast and listen to it while I go for a walk or go to the gym. But feed the mind somehow every day. Because, I've watched my father die of Alzheimer's. And it is a painful, horrible disease. I am doing everything I can to protect my brain and keep it functioning so that hopefully I don't have to deal with that.
Yeah.
And so those are 3 things I do every day that I believe help me advance, help give me what I need to be able to advance the mission that I'm on.
That's awesome. Those 3 things are very similar to mine. I actually do something every single day. I reach out to a friend or family member and just acknowledge that they're on my mind. And it's not cheesy. Like, it's not like, hey man, I just wanted to let you know I'm sitting here, I'm thinking about you. Like, I don't do that. I'll just reach out and be like, yo, how's your day? You know what I mean? Like, even, and as well as I do, when you become, this term's interesting for me to use, but when you become an influencer, my phone goes pretty constantly. I get messages all the time, people reaching out, trying to get my attention. And so when I take that time to then reach out to them, like, I know that they're going to be like, oh, cool. Justin's a good dude. And it doesn't even matter who it is. Like, just yesterday it was Justin Wren. I shot him a text. I'm like, yo, man, just want to let you know I'm thinking about you. Hope you're well. Cause he's rehabbing from shoulder surgery. Just hoping, hoping PT's going well. But those touches it does 2 things. One, if you look at it from an unselfish standpoint, which is kind of always my game, it makes them feel good. Like, oh, Justin's thinking about me. Even if I'm not even the most important person to them. Like, it makes them feel good. But 2, it builds your network. Like, if you want to think about it from like, why do I need to do this? Why is it so important to me? It builds your network. It creates those relationships that in turn you can then turn around and say, oh, cool. Let's work together. Like, the fact that I spoke with Ed Milet 2 days ago or whatever it was, 3 days ago, and he goes, we were talking about something post interview and he goes, that's why we connected. Let's work on that project together.
Yeah.
Like, this guy's massive and he wants to work with me on something, but it's because I gave things to him before, like unselfishly. It wasn't me being like, yo, let's work together. You know what I mean? But when you give, you get, and that's just the reality of life. And so I love all of those things.
And Justin, what you're illustrating there is the whole ask, listen, learn, serve principle.
Yeah.
Because you can't do the serve piece if you didn't ask and listen and learn what was important to them to know to do that.
Yeah.
If you didn't know he had shoulder surgery and was recovering, you couldn't have done what you did. So that's why it all links together.
Yeah, I love all that. So obviously I wrap up every single show with 5 rapid fire questions. But before we get there, where do people find you? How do they find your podcast? Where do they go?
Well, the podcast is Get Your Message Heard. It's on iTunes. It's also on some other places, but I'm not. I'm not the guy to ask for that. I think it's in Stitcher. I think a couple other places. And every episode is put on the website. My website's michaelhudson.com. It is about to undergo a transition, but feel free to go. And if somebody wants to go deeper, Justin, this page isn't ready yet. So as of today, it's not there, but it's going to be there because I'm working on it. But michaelhudson.com/explore. And that will be a place where you can sign up and then go through the schedule. There'll be a little information thing you fill out and then schedule an appointment where we can have a 30-minute conversation about let's explore your message, what it can do, what it can be, who it can serve, and where you are with it and where you need to go with it. So more than happy to offer that to your listeners.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it'll be out in a couple weeks. So is the website going to be up or?
Yeah, it's just a blog page.
Okay,
I
cool.
just haven't finished it, but yeah, it'll be up Monday.
Cool. Yeah. So it'll be out. Make sure you guys go there. We'll link it up in the show notes. We'll do all that good stuff. So we'll get into the 5 rapid fire questions. Some are fun, some are serious, but I ask you this: answer within one word or at the most one sentence. Are you
Awesome.
ready?
And I can do that, believe it or not.
That's good. So here we go. The first one is, what's the most embarrassing song you have downloaded on your phone?
Oh gosh. I'm going to say the Kermit the Frog version of Why Are There So Many Songs About Rainbows?
I love it. I love that, though. That's so great. That's awesome. What's your favorite smell?
Vanilla.
If you could have dinner with one person, living or dead, who would it be?
John F. Kennedy.
Awesome. What would you ask him?
I'd ask him, I don't know how I'd actually word this, Justin, but it would be, I'd love to know about the path that you journeyed through to become president and the intentionality, the things that how did that flow?
I love it.
And where did the dream, it's kind of where the dream came from, all that stuff.
Yeah, I would ask him if he knew he was going to get killed. I just dive right in. Like, did you know you were going to get shot at some point? At the end of your life, if you could be remembered for only one sentence, what would it be?
He helped me discover why I was here.
Awesome. So obviously this show is called The Growth Now Movement. So I wrap up every single episode with this one question, and that is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
Probably the day that I really got clear on what this message was about and realized it's not about me having to tell you all the details of what happened. We don't do therapy from the stage.
Right.
It is our job to get the message to the point where it can have the impact without going into all those details, because we've seen speakers who just walk back and forth and tell this long story and you wonder, where are they going? So it was the day when I realized it's more powerful to give a pithy sentence than it is to give a 10-minute story. As long as you've built the sentence to capture the lesson from the story. So it's that the lesson matters more than the story.
I love that. Michael, thank you so much for sharing this message. That's extremely important. Everybody needs to hear it. I just want to thank you for being you and coming on the show and just sharing time with me and my audience.
Justin, thank you. This was an honor and a privilege. And, I love the opportunity to talk with people who think about things at the right level. And that's one of the things that I was impressed when we met, and just love the connection, and honored to have a chance to reveal some of that to your listeners today.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Growth Now movement. This is how you can really help me out. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please share it out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that fun stuff. And let's grow this movement to epic heights. And it's all going to be because of you guys. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.